Hello, Jason. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
It's so awesome to have you here today. Thanks for joining Michelle's Conversations That Matter, a series that I'm doing to elevate the conversation about mental health and mental illness so
Mm.
people have a healthier relationship to the brain, and maybe they get inspired, get educated, and hear a little bit of themselves in some of the stories that I have. I showcase storytellers and professionals. You're both. So I'm grateful that you said yes, because I love your lens on addiction. And we're going to get into that in a minute. But before we do, could you please, Jason, take a second, introduce yourself, tell us where you are hauling in from today and what you do for a living.
Yeah, I am Jason Shires. I'm a regular guy with a title called psychotherapist and transformative coach, and I am in near Manchester, in the UK, and been working with addictions for more than 2 decades, possibly 25, 26 years now, in evolving ways as my own understanding has grown, really, of myself and of the people I work with.
Amazing. I think it's great. I love that you are taking what you've learned from your own experience. Before we went live, I was talking to you a little bit about this pandemic and the effect that it's been having on people. Here in New Jersey, for example, we're not under lockdown, but our neighboring states are. And I've just watched some of like my friends, the community around me during this pandemic and the impact it's had on them. And I know that there's an increase in drinking and an increase in indulging in things because people just don't have the means to do the things that they want in their lives. So it seems like an appropriate thing to really be looking at, because I know we're going to wake up from this pandemic and people might be in a situation of addiction because they've just been trying to navigate it. So could you take a moment, share with us a little bit about why you do the work you do and your personal story with addiction?
Yeah, sure. Well, I do the work I do because I'm just passionate about helping people that are suffering, and I think that obviously comes about from my own story. Way back when I was just a little boy, my dad went out one day, got killed in an accident, and and ever since then, I kind of created this idea of myself as a victim of trauma, and right back from an early age, I suffered with food addiction. Food was a comfort to me, it was my friend. It was a way of coping with the grief, not knowingly then. I didn't know what grief was. I was 5. I mean, I didn't know, as far as I knew, he went out and didn't come back. That was it. I didn't really understand death, didn't understand grief. But I knew that, like, food, putting something in my body, was an escape, was a way of coping, and so I just did more of it and as much of it as possible, to the point where I was massively overweight, from the age of 7 or something onwards, like right through to when I was 25, and so from there, everything went, out of shape, so to speak. Like schooling, I became truant at school. I started committing crime at a very young age, stealing, younger things, getting into trouble and stuff. But I guess I was all set up for the time that I found heroin at 13. It's kind of like, when I found drugs, I naturally kind of had a way in the world that I knew how to make money. I could commit crime and sell things. So I became like a career criminal, stealing cars, from cars, houses, anything I could to make money to support my own heroin addiction, as a young teenager. And that just got progressively worse, to the point where, everything had gone really from me. My life had disappeared, my connection with any family, I spent most of my time in and out of jail, for different reasons, and just escaping life as I knew it. At that point, I was very clearly a victim. In my own story, I was a victim of what happened to me. I had such a, you might call it, a chip on my shoulder, about life. I was bitter, I was twisted. I had stories about myself. I had stories about others, and life just seemed like a survival sport, just a way of just getting through every day. I was on various medications, and things looked quite bleak, to be honest. I mean, I ended up in a homeless shelter, funnily enough, where no drug addicts were allowed, but everyone was a drug addict, and it was like, that's where I ended up at the age of 23, where I ended up going into a rehabilitation center, 12-step rehabilitation center.
Mm-hmm.
And, I went to 12 steps. I got clean from drugs and alcohol, but and I'd say my life got better on the outside. I got a career. I got my family back in my life. I got some things that were important to me. My mental state, was stimulated. I learned things, but on the inside, my internal world, my idea of who I was, my feeling state, was on the floor. It was devastating. So, like, I stopped taking drugs and alcohol, but I picked up food. I picked up relationships. I was in and out of relationships that were bad for me. I was constantly on and off diets, going to the gym, obsessive. I lost 150 pounds once, and then I gained a lot of it back. And then I put that, it was just a constant battle with one thing after another. And, I would go to meetings, to 12-step meetings, thinking, God, like, my internal world, was just devastating. How I felt about myself, who I thought I was, the stories that I had about myself. And at that point, my story had changed a little bit. I thought I was a survivor. I thought I was a survivor of trauma, of tragedy.
Yeah.
And so the story changed, but really it was still there. It was still a story that affected my life. It was still something that I relied on as part of my identity. It was like part of who I was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And after at some point during that, I started training as a therapist. I spent 5 years training, and I did all sorts of qualifications, qualified in CBT, in NLP, as a person-centered therapist. And my main degree was in transactional analysis as a psychotherapy. But, what I realized at the end of all that training was that I wasn't happy. And I actually knew a lot of other therapists who were not happy too.
Mm-hmm.
But, these people that are struggling, the people that were like me, the people that were suffering, with all the things that I was suffering with, they just wanted to be happy. I just wanted to be happy. I just wanted peace of mind. It's like, just switch this off and leave me alone. That's what I really wanted, peace, And I was just trying to find it outside of myself, in things, in relationships, in people, in everything. And so I kind of I never really felt comfortable with, even though I had a practice as a therapist, it's kind of like I really felt fraudulent a lot of the time, in that I thought I can't really teach these people what they want. I can sit with them in their pain. I can sit with them in their suffering. I can identify with childhood trauma. I can work through people in the framework that I'd learned as a therapist.
Right.
But I never really got the idea of kind of that was just a concept. I mean, therapy is literally just a concept, a framework to look at people through. It really misses the human element of things.
Mm-hmm.
And going on a few more years, I continued my own seeking, and I used to judge myself for seeking. Like, I was always seeking, seeking something, make me feel better, fill me up, fill this empty hole in me, like with relationships, with anything, with food, with money. But now I see seeking differently. Seeking is just the knowing that there is a home, there is a place to call home, and that is inside me. And the difference happened was when I stopped focusing on what was outside me was going to fill this hole. But actually, I was what I was looking for all that time. I was what I was searching for. And it's funny how it happened that I ended up in LA with a coach called Michael Neal, who wrote The Inside Out Revolution. I came across him purely by accident, or not by accident, if you see how life really works with things that are beyond coincidence. That I spotted a video through some of his work, and I was really curious about what he was saying. I didn't know what he was saying. It didn't make sense to my intellectual mind. But on a deeper level, it resonated with something in me, and I had to know more. I knew. And I went and I spent 3 days with him in LA, and I just thought, I'm home. I just had that experience, that insight of going, you know, when I got there, it was like I used to describe life like spinning plates. Like I had the health plate, the relationship plate, the finance plate, you know, and I was constantly going backwards and forwards, spinning one, spinning another like that. It really felt like a heavy weight of life was on my shoulders, and there was a lot of me needed, you know, to do that. And I remember after those 3 days that it felt like that the plates had gone, and like I was at peace within myself. And it was like, and I remember having this experience where I was sat outside an Airbnb in LA, and I just had a huge sense of peace. You know, it was like I was just sat there thinking, well, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed on the outside world. I haven't got more money, haven't got a new relationship, haven't lost weight. You know, it's kind of like, but I just had this so calm feeling inside where I thought life just looks amazing. And I was looking around and I was thinking, oh, look at the beautiful grass and nature and all these things and the sunset. And I was like, where have I been? You know, it's like I'd been asleep in this dream. And and if you want me to, I can make more sense of this. You know, this is just my raw experience. You know? But it's like great. That's never left me. You know, that was years ago. And it's like, that's kind of the fundamental foundation of all my work with people who suffer with addiction. You know, I woke up to the truth of who I was. I transcended the story. I was no longer a survivor. I wasn't a victim. Those were just things that had happened. You know, I came into the present moment. You know, I wasn't in the past. I wasn't in the future. I was just there, you know.
How did you do that? Yeah. I think a lot of people would want to know how. Did you have like a realization? Did you meditate? Did you do psychedelics? What happened?
Yeah, well, those are some of the things that people do to get that state, for sure. I you know, in my work, it's kind of like the intellectual mind always wants to know how, because it looks like if it can know how, then it will be able to do it, right? I mean, that's just how our inquisitive intellectual mind works. Right. But through an insight, I mean, I had a realization, and it's kind of like, and that can happen at any time for anyone, for sure. But like Michael was a wonderful coach, and like, you know, he saw in me all the stories and things that I had about myself, and the same way that I do for people now that I work with. And I kind of, you know, I got into a quiet space and I just listened. You know, I was just present. I stopped thinking I knew everything about change, because I'd done so much training and I had so many long list of credentials. It was really that was probably one of the blockages to me seeing new, you know, because I thought,
yeah. So you're like, I should know. I have all this.
Yeah, I should know. I've been doing this for so long. I've got all these qualifications. I've got a master's. I've got this. I've got that. It's kind of like, you know, I should know. And it's like, I remember Michael saying to me, can you just like switch that off? That should know, you know, it's kind of like, and having the realization that you don't know what you don't know. So I had this experience of thinking, okay, I'm going to open up, you know, I'm just going to stop thinking I know, and I'm going to listen beyond my mind, you know, like, our minds are always like this, you know, like, is this good? Is it not good? I've heard that before. Is it like this? Is it like that? It's like something else. I know what this is. Like, we're constantly listening to the chatter of our own minds. And what that does is it just creates a blockage from us ever, from something, you know, getting beyond the filter of our own intellectual mind. So for me, my assessment of what happened at that time is that for whatever reason, I was willing at that time to just listen, you know, and absorb something and allow myself to see, because a realization is seeing something that's already true. It's something that already exists inside of you. It's not me teaching people to have about a realization of something new. It's me shining a light on something that's already there, you know, and that's what happened for me. I just saw that you know, it was a transcending of all the stories, of all the ideas, of all the thinking that I had about myself, you know?
Yeah, that's so powerful. Absolutely powerful. I love it. So now, of course, my next question is, now, how do you apply that to people who come to you and have like your story, right? Like, they have all of this success behind them and they know a lot, right? They're probably wisdom seekers like you. Now, how do you help them with this information?
Yeah. I mean, like, it's a very human approach, you know, in that, like I said to you about how I show up to talk, like with no plans, you know, it's kind of so counter, because as I said to you before, psychology and psychiatry sort of have set the scene for disease, you know, like addiction as a disease, addiction as a psychiatric diagnosis, addiction that needs techniques and tools to be fixed, you know, mental health that requires medication and requires ways of coping, and I'm kind of going completely against the grain with that and saying, well, actually, all mental health is a result of chronic overthinking, and addiction is a simple misunderstanding of how the mind works. And when we see beyond that, when we see beyond our own thinking about things about that, it's kind of like it disappears. It no longer makes sense to medicate my experience. Like if you take the analogy of a pressure cooker, if the mind is like a pressure cooker, then the steam valve is the thing that I'm doing, the addiction, and really, so the thing that I'm doing, whether it's drugs and alcohol, whether it's anxiety, depression, or whatever it is, that's just the symptom. It's the symptom of the misunderstanding that I'm creating in my own mind. So that thing is just the system working exactly as it's meant to. The anxiety is the physical, the physiology of my body. The addiction is me doing something, it's wisdom finding me a way to let off the steam from the insanity that I'm creating in my own mind. So it's really destigmatizes addiction as well. There's not something wrong with you. You're not broken. Everything is working exactly as it's meant to. And often for people hearing that, they feel such a sense of relief. Oh, you mean I'm not broken? I don't have a disease that I'm going to have to manage for the rest of my lifetime. I don't need medication. I'm going to be okay,
Yeah, that's a gift. That there is a gift. And you've given them hope, right? Because you're right. Like it feels like a sentence, right? It feels like, wow, this is something. So this is why people like you and I, before we went live, we're talking about why people resist talking about it, admitting it, getting support, because they don't want to be labeled as that person with this diagnosis and a life sentence to struggle. It seems like your approach is way different.
Oh, yeah, it's completely, I call it inside out rather than outside in. Outside in means that there's something wrong and I need something from outside of me to make me feel better on the inside. But inside out means I'm creating everything that's happening on the inside, and it's like, and then I'm projecting it outwardly as if it's happening to me. It's kind of like, that's like the difference. And, it's just really, it's just making sense. Everything makes sense of it rather than nobody wants a diagnosis. Nobody wants to be labeled or given that, and it's just there's no hope in that. There's so much hope in seeing, oh, this is just literally how it works. It makes sense that if I'm revving up my own mind with my own thoughts, then I need a steam valve to let off the pressure. It's kind of like, just makes perfect sense that way.
I think about the one thing that we all need right now, and that is hope. And I often relate this to, I go to a therapist, and a lot of times people go, I'm not going to go to a therapist. I feel like crap when I leave a therapist's office. And so I have an amazing therapist, Danny. I'm going to bring him on. He's going to be on my show. But Danny's the kind of therapist who sounds very similar to you. When I leave his sessions, I'm actually uplifted. I'm actually not drained or feeling worse. I'm actually left in a feeling of levity and hope. And I think that is what people need most. And that's what I want people to realize is possible with getting support, is it could actually help you feel uplifted and renew a sense of hope in a time where we all need just a little bit more positivity and hope that, you're not doomed. It's not doom and gloom. You're right.
Yeah. That is, obviously don't know about your therapist, but for me, when people leave, they feel lighter. That's the plan, and, like when I did my own training as a therapist, I can agree that my life got progressively worse. That was when I suffered my worst depression, was in my training as a therapist, because I was told, as a lot of people are, not all therapists, but like by many, that you have to go through something and desensitize yourself to it in order to make yourself feel better. So I spent a lot of time digging into the past, looking at the death of my father, all those things, because I thought, and I was convinced that those were the things that were creating my addiction. So it looked to me like that was the correct thing to do. And
Right.
that is what a lot of traditional therapists do. They take people back into the past, but the past does not exist. The past can only be experienced now in my own thoughts in this moment. It's not somewhere stuck inside of me. It's actually experienced through memories, through thought of the past. And, so when I went through my training, I had a horrific depression. And another thing was that I'd been flying long haul my whole life, and I'd never struggled getting on a plane once. And midway through my training, I remember being gripped to a seat in the airport, not being able to get on a plane, with having a panic attack. And like, I was having this visualization of the plane being in the sea and all this. And I was thinking, wow, what's going on here? You know, and it's like for about 18 months after that, during the rest of my training, I had to take medication to be able to get on a plane. Now, it didn't make sense to me because I've been flying my whole life. You know, I thought, why have I now all of a sudden got this overwhelming anxiety about traveling, you know? And again, because I was digging into the past consistently, you know, like in a traditional way. And what I'm saying is that you don't need to do that. You know, I don't take people back into their past now and dig up in their own personal details. I'll happily listen to it if they want to talk about it, but it's not the way to feeling better, you know?
Yeah. Tell us about that therapist in LA.
Michael. Yeah, Michael is a coach, and he wrote a book called The Inside Out Revolution. And I'd read the book, and I'd seen a video that he made called The Path of Effortless Change. And that's where I went on to do my coaching training in Super Coach Academy. And I did that twice, and it was life-changing. You know, it was really undoing all the, I'm not going to call it damage, but to me, well, maybe on a personal level, it's not malicious damage, you know, but it's kind of like, it's the innocent damage that's created by all the training that I'd done beforehand, you know, about what it is. And really it's about learning a human to human connection, about undoing all the concepts and ideas that are involved in psychiatry and psychology, you know, in ways of helping people, and just learning the one thing that most people can't do, and that is just be present with another human being. Just literally sit there without giving. I mean, that was one of the hardest things that I learned, was like, sit there, don't give advice, don't nod your head, don't shake your head, don't, you know, just be there with someone, you know, hold their hand if you feel called to do so, you know. It's kind of like, but feel your way into that thing with another person, you know, trust on your own instincts on being there with someone, and get rid of all this stuff that you bring to the session, like, oh, you know, all the script stuff, all the ideas that you have about what makes people better, what's wrong with them, fitting them into a framework, you know, all that stuff got thrown out the window, you know. And it's kind of like, and I just learned to be present with myself, you know, and to understand myself. And in the, you know, in the process of that, of understanding myself, my own suffering disappeared, and I learned how to be present with other people and what makes a difference, you know. And to me, that's, you know, seeing the health in people, seeing the health in what they're doing, you know, seeing that pressure cooker that I talked about in people that are suffering. People are lit up by that, you know. I might be the first person that's ever told them that they're okay, that everything's working as it should do, instead of somebody saying they're broken. And when you become that person for somebody, when you become that, knowing that they're okay, because they don't think they're okay at the time, you know, people come because they think they're not okay. But when you become that person who knows that they're okay, who sees that in them week in, week out, and points it out to them, points out the health in them, points out the things, points out their own wisdom, points out how they're really coping, even though they think they're not in life. You know, when you become that person for someone, people's lives change unrecognizably, you know.
I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure you're reminding me of, I did a lot of landmark training, and in one of the landmark courses that we did an exercise called Being With. And you literally are connecting with someone, and you're unable to, you're face to face with them, and you're looking in their eyes, and you're not speaking, and you're not making any gestures, and you're just present, fully present. It was an exercise that initially for me was incredibly uncomfortable. But at the end of that exercise, I was in tears because I felt that the person I was looking into her eyes, I thought that I got the sense that she was feeling what I was feeling, and then I, vice versa, was feeling what she was feeling. And so it just reminds me of the power of being with someone, like you said, judgment free, you know, no need to speak, just connecting and feeling them. I love it. I love that work. It's great.
Yeah. And you can fall in love with anyone from that place, you know, because you see who they really are beyond the stories, beyond the suffering that they're telling you about. You know, you can see the heart in people, and they can feel yours too, you know. And it's kind of like, and that is the place of healing for everyone. You know, that is the ultimate place of feeling seen, feeling heard, feeling valued from anywhere, that really touches people's hearts, that makes a difference beyond any concept or idea or technique that you can provide, you know.
So what advice might you have? I think about people who are struggling during the pandemic, who just maybe have a loved one who they witness is maybe disengaged or leaning on certain vices. Do you have any advice, any words of wisdom coming from all of the training that you have that could help just, I mean, I'm probably being very vague here, but any words of wisdom or advice?
Yeah, I mean, like, like taking the two people, you know, the loved ones of someone suffering and a person suffering as two different sets of advice. You know, it's kind of like that. You know, the one thing that anyone suffering struggles to find is someone who'll listen to them without giving advice, someone who'll be there, you know, someone who'll not try and change them, tell them what they need to be doing, you know, because it's so, you know, as the loved one, you know, we think we know what's best for the person, you know, and it's kind of like we're constantly trying to give them advice, tell them what to do. If it's affecting us, we're trying to stop them, force change, whatever it is, you know, we're in that role. And it's like, what happens for the person suffering is they just become more alone. You know, there's no one they can turn to. And as difficult as it is to listen, you know, when you haven't sort of really understood what that is, just to be present, that when that person's ready to ask for help, you know, if you can be just with them, you know, like we talked about just then they will come to you when the time comes. You know, if you can constantly judge them and tell them what they need to do, they're probably never going to come to you, you know, and that's for a loved one, you know, as difficult as that is, like to stand back and watch somebody, you know, self-destruct, even as I did, you know, it's kind of like that. But of course, I'm not saying, you know, don't save someone's life. Don't do, you know, take, you know, use your common sense, you know, it's kind of like, but I'm just talking kind of generally there. And, you know, for anyone suffering, you know, like, I mean, the best place, like, you know, if you take the pandemic as an example, you know, it's kind of like that. It really looks like the change that I saw was that it really looked like I had to get my outside world correct in order to feel okay. And the pandemic is a prime example of this, because it looks like we're suffering a result of other people's control, other people's actions, things that have happened in the world, and we're constantly looking to change the outside world in order to change our inside world. But actually, the outside world can't affect our inside world. It just can't. It's just that we just don't work that way. You know, the way we work is that there's something in between what happens and how we experience and the experience that we have. And that is our perception, you know, and like we're creating everything that we're experiencing in our own mind. You can be perfectly okay in the pandemic. Nothing could change, you know, in your inside world. But when you're suffering with a misunderstanding that, oh, if only the outside world would change, then I'll be okay, then you're going to be a victim. You're going to be at the mercy of how the world goes. And every time something doesn't go your way, you're going to be thinking, oh, God, it keeps happening. You know, my life's... And what happens is you perpetuate your own overthinking about the outside world, and then you talk to other people about it and you try and get support with it. But it's not going to change the outside world. And your experience of that is going to get progressively worse. Right. Whereas you know, like, what has this come to teach us? You know, what has this come? I mean, so many people have struggled for sure, but so many people have thrived, you know, in the pandemic. What does that mean? It means it can't be about the actual pandemic. It can only be about the perception of it. And, you know, I've loved seeing the world slow down. I've loved seeing the infinite ingenuity and creativity of people, you know, because people, if you would have asked everyone, oh, how would you cope if the world shut down? You know, they would have gone, oh, no, I can't do it. You know, but like what's happened is they've just all done it, you know, even though they thought they couldn't, you know, because that's where we're best. You know, we're best. Like, we can't make up an imaginary future and say whether we would be good or bad in whatever that imaginary future is. But when that thing happens, we can respond to life. We know what to do. We always know what to do, as has been shown, you know. So I guess, you know, for want of a better word, I don't like advice, but like, just see that in yourself. To me, what I call getting in at the deep end is where we're all best. We're all best. We all think that we won't know what to do when something happens, but we all always know what to do when it happens.
Yeah. We're resilient. We're more resilient. I think we underestimate how resilient we are, for sure. What if someone suspects that they are dealing with an addiction, that they realize during this pandemic they've just been drinking a lot more. Every night they're drinking, or they are doing recreational drugs. What advice do you have for someone who might be starting to reflect and go, "Ooh, maybe I'm doing a little too much. Am I addicted?" Like, what would you say to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, for a start, I'd say most people don't wonder if they're addicted. Like that's kind of like the first place to look. I think when you're asking yourself that question, there's a reason you're asking yourself that question, and that's kind of a common thing. Like, is there something wrong? It's kind of like what it's really is your own wisdom saying to you there's something wrong. But you, in your own thinking, you question that,
Right.
and always like. It makes sense, get some help, get some support. Don't be alone, don't be alone with it. Don't be afraid of getting help, and I mean, the best thing I ever did was just tell my story honestly and free myself of any shame or any worry about what I'd done, because I did some horrible things, but it's kind of like, but I realized that wasn't me, my true self back then. That was just me being lost in the world. In the same way that we all, if you take the human experience, just being human, we get lost in our own thinking and we do shit that we don't want to do. It's kind of all of us, behave in a way that's sometimes a way that we don't want to do, and it's okay. It's kind of like, it's okay to reach out. It's okay to get help. It's okay to say, I don't know. I guess the last thing I'd say is like, we don't know what we don't know, and it's okay to admit that. It's okay to say, I give up, surrender to win. For want of a better term, a 12-step term that made a difference in my life was surrender to win. Give up thinking I know, give up thinking that I should know better, give up thinking that I should have the answers, give up thinking that when I work this out, I'll then tell somebody. Just, it's okay.
Awesome advice. Tell us 2 things that you're grateful for, Jason.
Oh, wow. So much, I feel so grateful every day. It's kind of like, 2 things that I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for for being, having the understanding that I have, and the difference that makes to my kids' lives, just to be present for them, just to know that, I can be different for them than the experiences that I had, and that, and watching, so grateful for watching how magical they are and how they grow up in the world, and seeing their own wisdom in them at an early age. And, that's just a magical adventure. And as crazy as it may sound, I'm just grateful for the journey I've been on, even though it involved tragedy, which is sad and will always remain sad to me. It's like that. I often say that addiction is the path to enlightenment, because if I hadn't, everything that happens to us, everything that feels like suffering, everything that feels like a struggle is really pointing us somewhere. It's pointing us back to ourselves, in that place where for me, at the time, I was striving for things outside of myself. But what it's really saying is, is kind of like that you're looking in the wrong place. You're looking in the wrong place. So every bit of suffering is I'm looking in the wrong place. It's kind of, it's pointing me back to myself. So I'm so grateful for the journey that I've been on, because it's really just been, even though I didn't feel it at the time, it's been magical.
Amazing. So what's next for you? What are you up to in 2021? What are you doing over there in the UK that we should know about, and how do we follow you?
Yeah, I've created an online 28-day immersive addiction treatment program called Infinite Recovery, which is has an e-learning part, a live groups, and a community, and a workbook to work through, which is going to launch in 2021. I've been working on that for a while. That's kind of it. I've got my own private coaching business, and those are the things where I, if anyone's interested in talking about addiction or that's the thing that I love having conversations about. I love helping people that are struggling, people that are suffering. That's why I created my own program, a completely different approach to addiction to what's available out there. And the other thing about it being online for me, what I've created is that often people don't have time or don't want to take 28 days out of their life to go into rehabilitation, or they've got children, or they just can't do that, or there's too much stigma involved. Perhaps they've got a gambling addiction and they don't want to go into drug treatment, because that's the typical way of treating like a gambling addiction or a porn addiction, or something that there's shame about. And also my program can be done anonymously if you so wish, so because it's online, you can sign up in any way you want. I mean, I tend to advise people against it because I like to have that human connection and I don't want people to be hidden, but there's possibility of it there,
Right. That's amazing. And now in a virtual world, we're all connected. So you could be very much a global program for people, which is amazing.
That's what I'd hope for. That's what I'd love. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, before I let you go, any final words of wisdom that maybe you didn't share that you want the audience who's watching to know?
Yeah. But not that I didn't share it, but that I'd like to emphasize is that, for many years I heard the saying, and you probably have all heard it, that like the answers are inside, everything's inside. And for a long while that sounded like a great concept, it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, but I'll just keep looking, but like, no, really, that's the truth. It's like the human mind is conditioned to look for complex solutions, to problems that we suffer with. But actually the answer to all suffering, to all mental health, to all addiction is really simple, and it's like when we start looking introspectively, inwardly for the answers, in the creation of our own mind, how we're creating the reality that we're living in. That's what happened to me in those 3 days. That's when the answers come. They really do. As long as you keep looking outside at other people to change, at circumstances to change, to end suffering, or towards psychiatry, psychology to find techniques or pills or medication in order to make you feel better. It's a constant journey of seeking. It's a never-ending journey of seeking. The answers are all within. They're always within. No babies are born needing therapy. We're all born perfectly okay.
I love it. That is amazing. And thank you for sharing that. And thank you for everything that you shared during our time together. I'm so grateful that you came on, that what you're doing, the work you're doing. Thank you for all the lives that you're touching. And I'm sure that you touched more today in our conversation. So thank you, Jason.
Awesome. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
We'll stay in touch for sure. And I look forward to following you and all the great work that you're doing.
Awesome.
Be well.
Thank you.